Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys have been doing well and everything is going well. And I'll quickly do a mic test. I feel like I'm in like the early 2000s. I used to be an MC, and before we start any show, like even in school and all that, I used to always be the MC. I was always the designated MC. So I always do a mic test. So it feels like that's coming back again. So okay, it's working. Oh, good and clear. So, I know we are right in the middle of two major eclipses, and we're on the eve of the second eclipse and the last eclipse of this season, of this year. So, you may be feeling all sorts of stuff. So, do tell me in the comments how you have been coping, managing with this eclipse season. With that, this is another topic that is dedicated to my beloved Magnetic Twin Flame Collective. All right, so a very very warm welcome to all the new subscribers, and of course to those of you who have been walking with me from the very beginning of this journey. Like truly, when we look back, we really have to, you know, appreciate the amount of everything that we have done for ourselves, to where we are. So that's the reason why honor every moment, honor yourselves. Importantly, thank your internal teacher, thank your higher self. Always thank God, because today is a special day, and so is tomorrow, and so is day after tomorrow. And whatever happened in the past has set the foundation of today. So that's why today we are going to go into a topic that so many of you carry silently in your heart. We have all been there before, not only in this lifetime, life after lifetime, the classic divine masculine stink. See, but if you look at it, the world in itself is not always kind. And when we are navigating the world that isn't so kind, and on top of that, when our divine masculine actually stings us with rejection, it's a totally different ballgame. But you see, the reason why it hurts when our divine masculine rejects us, it's because it's like we are rejecting ourselves. And what worse to the soul than rejecting our own soul, right? So that's why we're going to talk about the sting of rejection, when our divine masculine says things like, I'm not interested, I don't like you, I don't like you at all, I never want to be with you, I will block you, and he blocks you, I'll never speak to you ever again. If anyone in the street says it, you probably think they are crazy, and you just leave it as it is. If someone your friend says it, you will be quite hurt, and then we will move on. If someone you have cared about says it, it will sting. But when our divine masculine says it, why does it cut so deeply? Why does it shake us to the core? And we start to ask ourselves, was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? Was it all a lie? But here's the truth that I want you to hear with your whole being. Our divine masculine's rejection wasn't rejection, it was the soul's way of resetting the field. On the human level, rejection always feels final. Always, right? You apply for a job, you're rejected. Chances are getting the job back again, only in very rare cases you will get it back, right? Human logic. Someone tells you in a bar they are not interested, very highly unlikely the person might gain interest. But having said that, anything is possible in this world of illusion, right? So, but anyway, on the human level, rejection feels final. It feels like the door has been slammed in your face and the verdict has been delivered. Your worth is denied. But that's the thing. In the twin flame path, it is not the human ego that is in control. It is the soul field. And when the soul gets overloaded, too many karmic triggers, too much intensity, too much density, the soul will force a shutdown. Think think of it like a computer that overheats, right? Like when our computer overheats, like I'm talking about the olden computers, when it overheats. Nowadays, our computers are much more resistant. Back in the day, it overheats. The system doesn't crash because it hates you, it crashes because it needs a reset. That's how it is. Our system doesn't crash because it hates us, it crashes because it needs a reset. So when what you experienced as rejection was actually your soul pulling back the emergency brake. Yes, our divine masculine's words can be so painful, can be so cold. His actions may feel very, very harsh. But underneath the mechanism was protectiveness. Because if the two of you had stayed at that vibration, you would have burned out the circuit of the union before it even has a chance to stabilize. So that's the reason why rejection wasn't an ending. It is a reset point. Our ego interprets rejection like this, and we've all been there before. He doesn't want me, I am not good enough. Usually as women, we usually look at our physical appearance, we usually think we have some personality flaw, and often in a wounded feminine face we tend to look at ourselves. We think that, oh, something is wrong with my personality, something is wrong. Maybe if I was 5 pounds lighter, my DM wouldn't have rejected me. Maybe if I was much prettier, he wouldn't have rejected me. Maybe if I had a different personality, he wouldn't have rejected me. The reality is, whatever it is, he would have rejected you, because this is the twin flame relationship. And it's our ego doing all this talking, right? I'm not good enough, it's over. But the soul translates it very differently. Our divine masculine isn't yet ready to match this frequency. Our field needs recalibration. And our soul is basically saying, pause here, integration is required. The no you heard in that moment wasn't a final dismissal. It was the soul saying, not this way, not right now, right? So here's what actually happens energetically in these rejection moments. A core wound gets triggered, abandonment, unworthiness, fear of engulfment. Number 2, the nervous systems of both you and your divine masculine is overloaded. The field can become chaotic. That's when our beloved divine masculine rejects us, acting as the conduit for the reset. And then separation creates a space for purging, integration, and stabilization. And then we process this, we heal and recalibrate. The connection reignites at a higher frequency. That no was not the end of our love story, it never is. It is usually when our divine masculine rejects us, that is the reset sequence. So that's why many divine feminines, you guys ask me all the time, why did it have to be him? Why did he have to be the one to say those words? Because in the polarity of the union, our divine masculine often plays the role of the interrupter. He holds the boundary. His no doesn't mean rejection of you. It's the masculine principle protecting the union from frying at the wrong voltage. And on some level, he agreed to play with this role before you both incarnated. That doesn't excuse his delivery, but it does explain the weight it carried. The real initiation of the divine feminine isn't about avoiding him. See, that's not our role. Our role is not to avoid our beloved divine masculine. It's about refusing to collapse into the story around pain. So instead of he doesn't love me, you hold the feel needed to breathe. Instead of he rejected me, you hold the soul pressed reset. So instead of it's over, you hold we are in calibration, recalibration. So when you anchor in this truth, you stop fighting the reset and start using it. You metabolize the pain into wisdom instead of letting it define your worth. So every twin flame journey has rejection moments. But not every divine feminine has the courage to interpret them. Rejection wasn't rejection. Remember, rejection isn't rejection. It was rehearsal. It wasn't abandonment, it was initiation. It wasn't the end, it is the soul's way of saying, not like this, reset, then return. So that's why it's so important, right? The next time you play a painful memory, when our divine masculine's words pierced our heart, shift the lens. So see for what it truly was, the soul's way of resetting the field so love could survive the long game. Because rejection was never real, recalibration always was. So see it this way. When your divine masculine rejected you, it wasn't a verdict about your value. It's never a verdict about our value. Literally, you see, the reason why when he uses a phrase like I'm not interested stings is because it can be very personal. Interest is like fundamentally rejecting every part of you. Like I'm not, like I've no interest hanging out with you. I have no interest in being with you. I have no interest in spending time with you. So that's why when a phrase like I'm not interested or not interested is used, it breaks every part of your being, but it goes down to your core wound of being a people pleaser as well, right? But having said that, the rejection hits deep because you're confused. He's spending all this time with you. It looks like, on balance of probability, that he wants to be with you, wants to spend all the time with you. But at the same time, when he says not interested out of the blue, after spending all this time, out of his boredom or out of his entertainment, or if his intention was using you. But what I'm trying to say is that when he uses words like I'm not interested, it goes deep. See, that's why I'm using that I'm not interested as one of the most common examples in most of my discourses, because it encompasses everything. But if it doesn't use such a phrase, you're always, as divine feminines, we will always be in the wounded feminine phase. There is going to be no way for us to grow, evolve, or break out of the people pleaser, love bomber, or that kind of personality where you cannot take such words, for example, right? That's why it's a mirror of where the field was misaligned. Like it's literally a mirror of misalignment. The field was saying this love is too real to run on a distorted wiring. This union is too powerful to build on unhealed wounds. So our divine masculine's rejection reflected not who we are, but where the energy was. So that's why it hurt so much. Not because you weren't worthy, but because the love itself demanded a higher calibration. So we often think, if he had chosen me, everything would be fine. But the soul knows the timing far better than our human minds. You see, I'm always running out of water. So, like I said, we often think if the soul had chosen me, everything would be fine, right? But the soul knows timing is far much more better. The timing matters so much. So imagine planting a seed in winter and expecting it to bloom. When the soil isn't ready, the conditions aren't stable, the roots can't hold. That's what union would have been if you had stayed in that frequency, a premature bloom that withers. So our soul pressed the reset to make sure the roots could grow before the flower opened. So here's something you may not realize. When he rejected you, he was also rejecting himself. Because in rejecting you, he was rejecting the part of him that saw himself in you, the people pleaser, the yes man. Where so often, when he uses words like not interested, or when he's saying no, it's because he's not able to say no in other aspects of his life. For example, at work, his boss might be asking him to do a lot of things that he doesn't want to do, so he practices saying no with you. Classic divine masculine behavior. That's why I say, when our divine masculine is rejecting us, he's rejecting the part of him that saw himself in you. So when you are like trying to be a people pleaser, trying to be so affected, that part of him that was ready but becomes terrified, because that part of him that loved couldn't yet stand in it. So the no was his collapse point. His fear got the microphone, not his soul. But the field used it anyway as a reset mechanism. So if it wasn't a victory of his ego over love, it was love hijacking his ego to create space for recalibration. So here's the paradox. His rejection is the feminine's initiation. It forces you into the deepest self recognition. Example: will you define yourself by his words, or will you define yourself by your soul? Will you collapse into I wasn't enough, or will you rise into I was always the frequency that triggered this reset? This is where, as the divine feminine, we stop seeking validation in our divine masculine's approval and start anchoring our worth in the eternal field. That's why the reset is sacred. It births our sovereignty. What follows rejection is usually silence. No text, no calls, and this period can go on for months, even years. Sometimes even hostility, because literally there's nothing you can do, right? Example, he blocks you. He tells you off. He runs away from you. He embarrasses you. He humiliates you. He places a very strong stance in terms of communication, like he doesn't want to talk to you ever again. But he will talk to your mutual friends, he will talk to your mutual connections, but he won't talk to you. There's nothing you can do. Really, honestly, there is nothing we can do about it. There is nothing. Unless he changes his mind and he decides to open the olive, extends the olive branch, right? But remember, that silence is an absence. That 5D visitations are not imagination. It's the soul's reset room. A sacred container where both nervous systems can cool down, purge, and rewire. You think you have been abandoned, but actually, you have been placed into incubation. The silence is where your frequency expands so that next time the field won't fry. So here's the deepest truth. The rejection itself proves the love. I know this is something you'll be like, what am I trying to say, right? Because only a soul bond this strong requires reset this intense. You don't need a reset for surface level attraction. That's why most people who don't like anyone, they won't even tell them that they are not interested or you don't. In fact, usually people who don't like someone, they would never be harsh. In fact, rejection will be the softest, barely like rejection. Example, person A doesn't like person B. Probably will look for the nicest way to tell the person off. It's like in fact they will be kinder, much more friendlier. But only in a twin flame situation the words are harsh, the blocking is harsh. Like, really, if you don't like a person, you don't have to block them. You can just let them go, unless you see, the blocking in itself, it's an answer to all of your questions, because the blocking is a reminder how much you are in your divine masculine's mind, that he has to block you, he has to embarrass you, because you are in his head, in his mind all the time, and he thinks a Facebook block will remove you from his mind. But that's far from the truth. If he blocks, there'll be guilt, and that guilt is a prison on its own. That's why I say, because only a soul bond this strong requires resets this intense. So you don't need a reset for surface level attraction, you don't need a reset for karmic flings. The fact that connection demanded a reset shows how powerful it is. Rejection was the measure of its reality, not its end. So let me say this to you, divine feminines out there. The rejection didn't mean you were unwanted. It meant the love was too alive to be reduced to a half-healed pattern. Half-healed pattern. So it didn't mean it is over. It meant it is recalibrating. And it didn't mean you were abandoned. It meant your soul was being ignited. Because the truth is, rejection is never rejection. Rejection was never rejection. It was always the soul resetting the field, so that when the return happens, it won't be reunion. It will be more than reunion. It won't just be reunion. It will be a union so powerful. So let's talk about what happens after the rejection. You're left with the echo of your divine masculine's words, the silence, the feeling of being erased. This is where most people collapse, but this is also where, as the divine feminine, we come into our greatest power. That's the reason why, let me take you back to the point where you rejected. Often on a soul level, you actually feel empowered, because you are in shock, right? After your divine masculine blocks you, a part of you is relieved, because in that way you don't get to see what's happening in his life anymore, which is it's like a God orchestrated block. But then a part of you keeps replaying, could I have done something better? Could I have done something better? Is there something I could have done to have prevented that situation? The reality is, what was meant to happen happens anyway, right? Even if you have prevented it, it would be performing. If you hadn't prevented it, it's also performing. But what happens is, when a rejection is strong, the catharsis is even stronger. Because rejection is raw fuel. And when you learn to alchemize it, it becomes empowerment. It becomes alignment. It awakens the fire. It becomes the fire. It awakens the fire in you. It becomes the fire that awakens the third energy between you. At first, the pain makes you want to shrink, to disappear, to believe the story. I wasn't enough. I was too much. I'll never be chosen. But the moment you shift from collapse into creation, everything changes. You start asking, what is this pain trying to show me about my own worth? Where do I still hand my value over his choices? How can I build the frequency of union within myself, no matter what he's doing in the 3D? That shift is where empowerment begins. So, one of the most powerful tools of transmutation is sacred anger. So, now I'm not talking about lashing out or getting revenge. I'm talking about the fire that rises in you and says, I will no longer let his words define me. I will no longer collapse every time my divine masculine withdraws. I will stand in my field even if he walks away. Sacred anger burns through illusion. It recalibrates our nervous system and it anchors the divine feminine into our true frequency, which is sovereignty. So, when you no longer collapse into the story of rejection, something incredible happens. The third energy, that shared soul current between you, starts to reweave itself. Because instead of pouring all your energy into why did he leave me, you pour it into alignment. You ground into your body. You expand your spiritual field. You anchor into your mission, your joy, your calling, and the third energy strengthens. It grows more coherent. It becomes impossible for him not to feel it even in silence. So here's the part you may not see, but he absolutely feels when you transmute rejection into empowerment. Our divine masculine notices it. Even if we think he might not, he is noticing it. Not consciously at first, he may not send a message, he may not admit it, but energetically, the meetings in the 5D will increase. Multidimensional interactions will increase too. Because energetically he feels the collapse of the old dynamic. He feels that the field no longer is feeding his fear. He feels, as the divine feminine, you're standing in power, not chasing his approval. And that shift destabilizes his ego while awakening his soul. It begins pulling him back, not because, as the divine feminine, we have demanded it, but because the third energy itself becomes magnetic again. So, my dearest ones, here's the truth: rejection is never the end. It is the ignition point for your greatest transformation. It forces you to stop waiting for him to validate you and start anchoring the union within yourself. It teaches you that your worth isn't defined by his choices, and it strengthens the third energy so that the return happens. It will meet you at the level of true union, not wounding, not illusion, not collapse. Because rejection isn't rejection. Rejection isn't rejection, it is alchemy. It was the first fire that birthed your sovereignty and the reset that prepared the field for union. I know I'm repeating myself here, but for emphasis, I will. That's why when our divine masculine rejects us, it might look like he was in control. He said the words, he made the choice, he walked away. But here's the paradox: that moment wasn't actually about control at all, it was about collapse. Because when he pushed you away, he wasn't showing strength. He was revealing the exact places where his fear outweighed his soul. Rejection wasn't his triumph, it was his initiation. Every time the masculine says, I don't want this or I can't do this, he's not closing the door forever. He's stepping into his soul classroom. The rejection throws him into a mirror he can't escape, because once he pushes you away, he has to live with the echo. He has to live with the silence of the third energy. He has to sit in the absence of your field, and that absence becomes the very thing that awakens him. So even if he tries to convince himself it was the right choice, even if he runs to distractions, karmic partners, work, or denial, or becomes category 6, sleeping king, the soul keeps whispering. He feels you in the quiet moments. He dreams of you. He notices the contrast between what he feels with you and what he feels without you. And slowly, the rejection he delivered becomes the lesson he cannot ignore. So here's the deeper truth, all right? When he rejected you, he was also rejecting himself. Like literally, when our divine masculine runs away from himself, it's metaphorical that he's running away from himself. That is the truth. Like literally, for example, let me give you a scenario. If a divine masculine is rejecting his divine feminine in, let's say, a public place, he's telling her, I don't want to talk to you ever again, can you leave, stop apologizing, I don't ever want to see you again. And he literally runs. Metaphorical example. I can't think of any other example at this hour, but he's literally running away from himself. He probably had a bad day. He was probably retrenched. Maybe he was kicked out from his work. Maybe he was just insulted by his boss. Maybe he was just told that he's horrible and he's good for nothing. And then you stand there with puppy eyes and you look at him like, that he means the world to you. Of course he's going to reject you. Because he's rejecting himself. Because he hates himself. And you are before him, looking at him as though he's looking at him like he is your world. Of course he's going to reject you, because you are his mirror, his soul, his counterpart. So when he said no to you, he was really saying no to the part of him that was ready, the part of him that loved, the part of him that wanted to surrender. That's why it haunts him. That's why he replays it too. Even if he never admits it, the rejection wasn't a dismissal of you, it was a fracture within himself. This is why rejection becomes initiation, because in pushing you away, he confronts the emptiness of his own defenses. Because in losing your presence, he realizes what your presence really meant. Because in choosing fear, he discovers that fear doesn't satisfy. And so the rejection becomes the very doorway through which our divine masculine's awakening begins. So, beloved divine feminines out there, fellow divine feminines out there, when you look back at those words, I'm not interested, I will never speak to you again, don't see them as his victory excuse me, over love. See them as the beginning of his initiation. The moment when the soul hijacked his ego, the turning point where his human self thought he was in control, but his higher self was already working through the collapse. Because rejection is not rejection. It was the setup for our divine masculine's awakening. The silence you were thrown into was the silence that began to haunt him. And the distance that broke your heart was the same distance that started to break open his. So now let's talk about what happens, what happens to him after he rejects you. Because believe it or not, what happens to us and what happens to him, it's something to be discussed. Because first let me start with what happens to us. Because how we carry ourselves, how we hold the field, will directly affect how fast, how deep, and how real our divine masculine's awaken unfolds. See how it's correlated? So rejection isn't just his test, it's our test too. And as the divine feminine, our response is the lever that determines whether the reset turns into collapse or transformation. So most of us divine feminines in those early stages do what we've all done at some point. We chase more. We try to apologize, we try to message, we try to convince him to unblock us. But the truth is he's not. he is not going to unblock you. He's not going to talk to you. He is not going to come back until you keep performing, until you keep being in your wounded feminine. He's not going to return because vibrations don't lie. That's why you chase after him, trying to prove your worth. It's not going to work. You beg for clarity, hoping you will explain himself. It's not going to work. You spiral into self blame, thinking you broke the connection. That's not going to get you far either. And while all of this is natural, here's the truth: every time you collapse into that story, the reset takes longer because instead of letting the feel breathe, you keep pulling on the very cord the soul is trying to untangle. But when, as the divine feminines, we hold the frequency, holding the frequency, everything shifts. Holding frequency doesn't mean pretending you're not hurt. It doesn't mean numbing yourself or playing games. It means staying rooted in the truth. This rejection is a reset, not a verdict, of our worth. So that's what I keep saying again and again. When we hold that stance, our divine masculine feels something very different. He feels the field stabilizing instead of collapsing. He feels our feminine strength, not our desperation. He feels his own words echo back to him without you rushing to fix them. And that echo is what awakens him. One of the hardest but most powerful truths is this: your stillness speaks louder than your pleas. When you stop chasing, stop convincing, stop collapsing, the silence becomes his teacher. It's in that silence that he finally hears his own fear, his own emptiness, his own longing. Your restraint doesn't mean you don't care. It means you trust the soul's design, and the trust accelerates his awakening far more than any words you could have spoken. So think of it this way, all right? Rejection throws the union ship into a storm. Our divine masculine is thrashing in the waves. And if you jump in after him, both of you drown. But if you stay anchored, grounded, steady, holding frequency, he eventually finds his way back to the anchor point. The anchor point is you, not your chasing, not your convincing, but your feel. So that's why, as divine feminines, our role after rejection is not to fix our DMs. It's not to undo what he said. It's to hold the reset, to trust the field, to stand so rooted in your word that his no dissolves in the presence of your frequency. Because the faster you embody the truth, the faster the masculine realizes that rejection didn't break the bond, it only broke his illusions. And the faster he realizes that, the sooner he begins the walk back. Because rejection isn't rejection at all, always. So think of it this way, guys. I want you to take a moment, as I'm coming to the last part of my discourse. So let's bring this all the way home, right? When our divine masculine rejected us, it felt like the dead end of the story, like the last page of the book. But in truth, rejection is never the ending. It's the doorway, the reset that makes union possible. Because union can't be built on half-healed patterns. It can't be grounded in fear, illusion, or collapse. The rejection is the soul's way of burning all that away. So what remains is strong enough to carry divine union. So that's why every rejection moment, every silence, every painful reset, they aren't random setbacks. They are part of the architecture of union. Every reset clears karmic density. Every reset strengthens our sovereignty. Each reset awakens our divine masculine to what he cannot ignore. So instead of thinking, this was the moment I've lost him, shift the lens. This was the moment that the field prepared us for the next convergence. Union doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in a spiral. That means you circle through the connection. All right? Listen to me carefully here. Trigger, rejection, reset, reunion, again and again. But every time the spiral moves upward, the lessons deepen, the field strengthens, the union becomes more anchored in truth. So even the hardest rejection moments are still part of the upward spiral. They are not detours, they are initiation. So here's what you need to know. The field never resets for nothing. Every reset carries a written coded in it. It might not happen tomorrow, it might not happen in the way you imagined, but the reset always clears space for higher convergence. Because rejection was never meant to separate you, it was meant to refine you, both of you, so that when the field pulls you back together, you're not meeting in collapse, you're meeting in alignment. So when you meet again after the reset, you will realize something profound. Rejection never had power. It was always recalibration. It was always initiation. It was always preparation for the union that could actually stabilize and last. The very words that once broke you will one day reveal themselves as the words that set the whole field in motion. That's why. That's why. If your DM, says, I'm not interested, or I don't like you, I don't want to be with you, these words are going to stand through time. And when you come out on the other side, it will all shift, change. So that's why, beautiful souls, let this be your remembrance. Rejection was never rejection. It was the soul pressing reset. It was the doorway to everything your new reunion was meant to hold. So don't see it as the moment he ended the story. See it as the moment the story truly began. Because every reset is preparing you. Every reset is preparing our divine masculine. And every reset is preparing the field for the final convergence where union is no longer fragile but eternal. So if today's teaching spoke to you, to your heart, let me know in the comments what has been your experience with rejection on the twin flame path, and more importantly, how has it transformed you? And if you're ready for deep clarity in your twin flame journey, you can always book a private session with me. I'll leave the link down below for the special first time twin flame psychic guidance session. I've also advanced twin flame healings, sacred anger transmutation, third energy field expansion, union field activation, and soul realignment, designed to help you anchor the truths not just mentally but energetically as well. So if you like to take this moment to just take it all in, remember one thing: everything happens for a reason. All right, with that, remember, rejection is never rejection. It's always the soul resetting the field. Until next time, I'm sending you so much love, strength, and clarity on your journey. And take care of yourselves as we are, in the eclipse energies. But great things always happen during eclipses like this, And this eclipse, this upcoming eclipse in the new moon, is going to be a very powerful one. So with that, see you all again with another discourse. Oh my, I noticed that this discourse is running close to 43 minutes. All right, bye bye, have a good one. And I need to get to I need to sleep as well. All right, take care and bye bye.